That's the wrong formula, she whispered, and his pen stopped an inch above the dotted line. The room held its breath. The chandelier light trembled on crystal, and the billionaire's eyes lifted to meet the gaze of a waitress who should have been invisible in a room like this. She wasn't. Not now. Not with $100 million balanced on the hinge of a single sentence. Before we begin, if this kind of story speaks to your heart, feel free to share where you're reading from. It's always beautiful to see how far stories can travel. Enjoy the story. The whisper Rowan Ivers had learned to love the hush before a deal closed. It reminded him of a chapel in the small Appalachian town where his father prayed before descending into coal. It was the same hush he had felt years ago, the moment before the ventilators were switched off for someone he couldn't save. Silence, he knew, had weight. Now, under the glass chandelier of Larkspur with gold-edged menus and hush-thin jazz, he reckoned with that weight. In the reflection of the water glass, he looked older than 39. Soft downturn at the corners of his mouth, a bruise of sleeplessness under each eye. Felix Dern, the buyer, sat across from him, perfectly centered, a subtle smile calibrated to a decimal of cordiality. A binder, glossy and embossed with the Iverson Labs sunburst, lay open to the page that mattered most. "Sign, and we can keep the timeline for the Q3 announcement," Felix said softly. "Your board will toast you by midnight." Rowan wanted to believe the line. He wanted to believe the past 5 years of bleeding cash and betting on a miracle had arrived at their rightful ending: headlines, solvency, the naming rights to a newly built factory in his father's town. He held the pen between fingers that had trembled on cold nights in labs no one would name. They were steady now. Then came the lemon scent and the whisper at his shoulder. "That's the wrong formula." It was almost nothing. 2 syllables per word, so soft the vowels barely rose above the clink of glassware. But the waitress's voice threaded into his ear like a dropped bead that found a hidden groove. Wrong, Rowan turned. She had eyes the exact color of green glass bottles washed ashore, bright with a private light. A loose, dark strand fell across her cheek. She wore the restaurant's white shirt and black apron, skin freckled from a childhood he imagined with beaches and books. And those eyes were on the binder, not him. Focused, fierce. "I'm sorry." Felix's smile stiffened. The waitress flushed, but did not retreat. "I'm sorry," she repeated to Rowan alone. "It's incorrect. This ratio, if you publish that formulation, you're going to get a runaway reaction at scale and someone's going to get hurt, or the process will fail. It can't be both safe and efficient with n equals 9 on that ligand side chain. It should be n equals 7. The world rearranged. The gloved hand of the maitre d' appeared at the periphery. Mira Chen, Rowan's CFO, tensed, the only sign a ripple beneath silk. Dr. Orlov, Rowan's grim chief scientist, blinked very slowly, like a lizard unbothered by weather. Rowan stared at the page. The line of numbers she'd indicated should have been unremarkable to anyone not already living in the marrow of his technology. Aster 9, the miracle amine, the key to making carbon capture cheap enough to matter. They had promised a reversible bond that could be broken with low heat, half the energy penalty of the next best competitor. It was the closest thing Rowan knew to prayer. N equals 9. His mouth went dry. "Who are you?" Mira asked. Calculated chill, Fisher of Fury. "That page is confidential company property." The waitress swallowed. "Naomi, Vale." She pointed, a half-inch from the line of print, never touching. "Delta H for the carbamate formation is going to be too favorable if you extend that chain. You'll get exotherm you can't handle. The pilot plant, you'll have a thermal event. You signed up with the state to be beside 2 daycare centers, did you know that? Wait, I'm sorry, that isn't my business, but it's wrong." Felix laughed, too loud. "This is absurd." "Security," the maitre d' murmured. Rowan's breath returned as a hard knuckle in his chest. He looked again. The printout matched the last pre-press he'd skimmed this afternoon, he was almost sure. He had skimmed. He'd been moving so fast his eyes were oars on floodwater. He felt the weight of all the tired eyes at his company. The 62 engineers, the line workers waiting for construction to finish, the interns with their bright faces. He tore his gaze from the page. "Everyone stop. Back off, please." The pen rolled to the white cloth. He picked up the binder and stood. Mira's eyebrows climbed in a tiny private flare of coal fire. Felix blinked. "Dr. Orlov, Mira, Felix, give me 20 minutes. Felix's smile turned reptilian. "We have a schedule, Rowan, and I flew in from Zurich." "Order dessert, I'll pay." Rowan looked at Naomi. "You, come with me." Roman too. Back corridor, the hallway that led to the kitchen smelled of butter and burned coffee. A line cook looked up from a sauté pan to stare. Silver refrigerator doors closed and opened in the rhythm of men who had memorized a dance. Naomi walked 2 steps behind, as if either direction might result in a permanent mistake. He pushed open the back office door. The manager's desk was empty, a camera blinking above the printer, a calendar filled with colorful pen scribbles. Rowan set the binder down beside the keyboard and only then noticed his hands were trembling. "Tell me," he said. Naomi wetted her lips. Up close, the freckles were a constellation. She wasn't much younger than him, perhaps 10 years. But there was a tiredness beneath her eyes that made an older story out of her face. "I shouldn't have. I know. I'm sorry. I saw the page when I set the wine. The binder was open. I recognized the structure." A small laugh, edged and brittle. "I recognize it like I recognize my brother's handwriting. It's a game I used to play with myself, you know. See a structure even for a second and try to reconstruct the rest in my head. Numbers have sounds for me, or colors sometimes. It's silly." "Not silly." He leaned forward, his voice lowered. "And the imidine you're using for steric hindrance, if you push N to 9, your activation energy drops too low. You lock the CO2 too tightly at operating conditions, and when you strip it, you're going to need more heat than you think. You'll fight equilibrium in a way the lab data didn't show because your mass transfer at scale is different. And if you try to cheat with a co-solvent at that chain length, you'll cause polymerization. It'll be small at first, then it's going to run. It's going to run, and if there's contamination in your bed, old catalyst, oxygen, metal," her hands trembled now, "you'll get a cascade. You're running this next week, aren't you? Westline." He stared. He realized his mouth was open and shut it. "Who do you work for, really?" "I'm a waitress," she said. Then, reluctantly, "I was a doctoral candidate. Chemie, I left. My mother got sick and I couldn't justify the debt. I had to take care of my brother. He's in 8th grade. He plays the trumpet badly. I've been here 6 months. It pays better than the coffee shop. And you just saw this. I've run something adjacent," she said. "In a different field, different capture. But you don't forget a ratio that kills a bench run you've babysat for a week." "I don't forget." She hesitated. "I once killed a run like that. I thought I'd gotten it right. I'd missed a coefficient. The lab smelled like burned sugar for days. One of the grad students got a burn, not bad, but I saw the skin blister and I thought, what if I was off by a decimal more? What if I was careless and someone got hurt because I thought I was tired? Because I couldn't afford glasses. I left the month after." Rowan's chest shifted. A coal seam in his ribs tried to catch fire. His father's voice hushed in his memory. "Don't ever stop a man from telling you why he did the thing he shouldn't have done. That's where you find out who he is." He drew a breath, slide the page, read, and there it was, like a snake you'd stepped on without meaning to. N=9. He had signed off on N=7 in June. He had argued until midnight for the middle ground. So where? He lifted his head. Mira. In the dining room beyond the kitchen, laughter swelled. In the heavy bordered quiet of the office, the two of them hung in a suspended thread. Naomi's hand had flinched away from the binder, fingers curling as if they remembered heat. "I appreciate what you did," Rowan said carefully. "It took guts." "Tell the maitre d' that," she said wry. He looked at the camera above. "You could get in trouble." "Already am, I think," her mouth tilted. "I'm not trying to ruin your deal." "I know what a deal like that means, I do. It means salaries and health insurance and probably a lot of press you never wanted." Rowan laughed, startled. "You know that. Bosses at table 4 and 5 talk. They forget waiters are human. We hear things in a ghost way. Go sign if you were going to sign. I didn't tell you to stop. I said wrong, that's all." "Mira's going to fire you," he said. "She can try," Naomi said. It was bravado, but only just. He clicked the binder shut. "Come on." Mira's smile at the table looked beautiful, the way a blade looks beautiful in a museum case. Felix's was more basic greed. "We were about to order soufflé," Felix said, "and then tell moral fables about scrappy founders, which are everyone's favorite dessert." Rowan set the binder down. "I need to verify a technical spec. We are not signing here." Felix's eyes flashed. "A winter animal. We've been over the spec. Then you won't mind me taking this upstairs." "Upstairs?" "There's a copy room," he said. "I'll scan this page to my own archive, compare it to a hash on my drive." He looked at Mira and let the warmth drain from his voice. Why did the formulation change? For a heartbeat, the mask on Mira's face slipped. She flicked a glance at Dr. Orlov. He stared at his wine as if he'd never seen a glass in his life. The formulation didn't change, Mira said smoothly. The rendering did. It's a typo. Which one, the 9 or the 7? He raised a hand. You know what? Don't answer. We'll see. Felix leaned back. Rowan, don't make the mistake of what is the phrase, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. You think too much. Your genius is not your chemistry. It's your ability to avoid thinking yourself into paralysis. Sign, and your life gets easier. I know something about paralysis, Rowan said. I prefer the one that isn't permanent. He picked up the binder. Security, the maitre d' said, agitated as if Rowan were a customer trying to steal his own suit jacket. You cannot take, Rowan slid one of his platinum cards onto the table. I just bought your restaurant for the night, he said softly. You can call the owner. Or you can let me walk down that corridor with a piece of paper. Mira stood. Rowan, he did not slow. If the chain is wrong, we stop. If it's a rendering error, I'll be back in 10 minutes, apologize, and sign. In the corner of his eye, he saw Naomi, small but composed, watching him as if his next step would tell her something important about what men do with their power. Roman 3. Audit Rowan ran grocery aisle fast to the copy room. He snapped photographs with his phone, fingerprint-laced and flawed. He sent them to his secure drive. He fetched up his June hash for the formulation. Like every paranoid founder, he'd filed a signed copy with the day's news headlines scrolled in for proof ink, and watched the second circle chase its tail. Mira entered without knocking. You idiot, she said. You cannot be the one to spook a deal. That's why you have me. You spooked at last, he said evenly. Why did the number change? It's a decoy, she said. The investors leak, you know this. We feed slightly altered data to each suitor. The real spec never leaves the room. If we see it in the wild, we know who to sue for theft. Except you included the altered spec in page 12, the one Felix convinced you to fold into the warrant, which is a representation of our actual production formulation. Mira stared. She went still. The stillness deepened into a hard shell. He did not. He did. His phone pinged. He looked. The hash did not match. Orlov, where did you last see this deck? On Mira's device, Orlov said mildly. He had appeared in the doorway without footsteps. He had a way of moving that suggested snowdrift, something that covered slow violence with quiet. She asked me to approve this draft. Mira's mouth thinned. It's a typo, Rowan. You let this go, and you kill our clock. Not a typo, Naomi said. She stood in the hallway, half in and half out of the door, apologetic as if she had walked into a stranger's apartment by mistake. Not if it's also in the footnote. You have n equals 9 there, too, on the temperature sensitivity line. Who brought her here? Mira turned. Who let her back through after I told the hostess? I did, Rowan said. You changed the number, Mira, accidentally or not, and Felix folded it into binding representation language. I didn't, Mira's voice caught itself before it broke. We put decoys, everyone puts decoys, it's good practice, we cannot get scammed, not again. Not again, he echoed. The black-edged memory unrolled. Before Mira's time, the deal in 2021 when a different investor siphoned out their algorithm and undercut the pilot, and Rowan had to bury 3 layoffs in the official narrative. You told Felix we'd include the deck spec in the warrant. She spread her hands, palms up and pleading for something beyond her. He insisted. I didn't see the mismatch. I worked the numbers for the vesting schedule. You told me to bring back capital that smiles, Rowan. It smiled. Forgive me for thinking it meant anything. Rowan looked at her for a long minute. There were 100 people standing on the far edge of this choice, and they needed not absolution but a building that wouldn't turn to furnace. He reached for the binder again. Throw the deal, he said. Orlov's head tilted. Excuse me. Throw it. We stop. We apologize to no one. We fix the deck. We write the correct number into that warrant. We take a loss of a month and we prevent a felony. He looked at Naomi. Vale, Naomi, do you know how to run Aspen Dynamics? She blinked. I'm a waitress. And a former doctoral candidate who can see numbers and hear them. Can you run it? Yes, she whispered. Then you come with me to Westline tomorrow. You sit in front of the pilot. If we're wrong and we can run n equals 9 without setting the county on fire, I'll hire a brass band to apologize to Felix and Mira and fans across LinkedIn. If we're right. You don't know me, Naomi said, stunned. I'm nobody to you. You're the only one in the room who did something with nothing to gain, he said. That's not nobody. Mira's mouth opened and closed. You're going to risk the company on a waitress. I'm going to risk my company on not burning down daycare centers, he said. He picked up the phone to call his board chair. and I'm going to find out who told Felix to fold my decoy into my warrant. Because you wouldn't do that, not even by accident. Orlov shifted his weight. It was so slight a movement it could have been air circulation. His expression did not change, but when Naomi's eyes flicked to him, she went still in a way that made Rowan's mind sharpen around the edges. Recognition, alarm. Do you know Dr. Orlov? He asked softly. Naomi's voice was thin as paper. No, not personally. Orlov's mouth quirked, a fox smile. Yet you recognize me. He blinked. And then, like a light catching a shard of mirror, Rowan saw it, the photograph from a 2017 conference in Zurich, a round table on catalysis. Orlov's beard was shorter now, but the angle of his shoulder was the same. The man seated 2 chairs away, elbow on the table. Felix Dern. Do you work with Felix? Rowan asked. Orlov shrugged, the shrug of a man unwilling to spend any more words than the minimum. Everyone works with everyone in this town, Mr. Ivers. Rowan's choice snowballed from a whisper into a decision. He called the board chair. He said the thing he knew would set off sirens in at least 2 other zip codes. We're suspending negotiations, he told the chair. We need to talk about an internal breach. The board chair, an eminent woman with a voice that had weathered 17 markets, exhaled. You're sure? I'm sure enough not to trade integrity for speed, he said. She was quiet for a beat. He could hear the tiny drag of her cigarette against porcelain. Get me proof, and get me a plan. If it blows up, I cannot save you from the press. He hung up. He looked at Naomi. He swallowed. You okay? She gave him a small smile that made his ribs hurt, because it looked like a smile you give a child who has just tried to lift something heavy. I don't know. You have a brother. Ezra. He likes the trumpet. He is exceedingly bad at it. Bring him to Westline if you'd like. Stay the night at the company house. It's safe. Her mouth changed at the word, safe, as if the syllable didn't sit well in her mouth. I'll figure it out, she said. You know you're making enemies, he grinned, and for once it wasn't performative. I've collected them like stamps. Comes with the hobby. Roman 4, night drive. They drove west out of the city in a company SUV that smelled of new leather and cleaned carpet. Naomi watched the glass of skyline fall behind them like a promise you realize you didn't want. Ezra rode shotgun, his trumpet case across his knees like a child he'd been entrusted with. He had a nose that would soon be too big for his face and eyes that scanned the world for jokes. So you stopped a big rich guy from changing the weather wrong? He asked, bouncing in his seat. Something like that, Naomi said. Sort of. You're going to work with them, he said. Does that mean we're not poor? Naomi winced. We're not poor, she protested lightly. It was true in the way that chairs and roofs are true when you name them. They had both. They had lived in worse. But with their mother's medical bills and the insurance company's sanctimonious letters and Rowan Ivers at the wheel, poverty felt less like a label and more like a floor they kept tripping. Rowan glanced in the rearview. We pay hourly over minimum to everyone in the plant, he said. Housing if your commute is long, health insurance if you're half-time or more. Doesn't make me a hero. Makes me a person who got sick of pretending he couldn't afford to treat people like humans. Wow, Ezra said, enthralled. Do you meet famous people? Rowan thought of the men who pretended to be gods and ate medium-rare steaks with eyes like money. Sometimes, he said. Mostly I'm in rooms with people who argue about heat. Ezra's laugh bubbled and Naomi's shoulders unspooled a fraction. The road unwound. Night thickened. Rowan's phone tensed in the cupholder, buzzing every few minutes with messages from Mira, the board, Felix's assistant with a polished fury that tried to sound like legitimacy. He let them slip by. He felt tired and alive and at a precipice that had nothing to do with a $100M deal and everything to do with the warded-off ache in the center of him that turned meetings into battlefields and lovers into tests. Why did you leave? He asked Naomi when Ezra had fallen asleep, head canted back, trumpet case sliding. She knew what he was asking. My mother had her first attack in January, multiple sclerosis. I was already on thin ice with my advisor. He liked a certain kind of student. I was not. I asked for time off to help my mom and she flicked a glance at the sleeping boy. He told me I was not serious. He took my project and gave it to his favorite, who had a laugh like a wine glass shattering. I walked. It felt like failing. Sometimes I dream in ratios, though. It doesn't go away. What was the project? Alternative sorbents. Shifting to solid state under certain humidity. I had a thing I thought might work, a layered approach. Then Lily, she slid the name out like a shard. My friend. She got splashed with something we weren't supposed to have in the lab. It wasn't labeled right, not dangerous, but she freaked. She left the program a month before me. I see her sometimes at the pharmacy. She always holds the bottles like someone might snatch them away. Who was your advisor? He asked, soft, carefully. She looked out at the black fields. Felix Dern wasn't always a man with a watch that expensive. He used to write on whiteboards with the edges of his hand blue. He knew how to make you feel like you were almost brilliant. Rowan's stomach fell as if he'd hit a missing stair in his own house. He worked at State. For a semester, visiting genius, they called him. She was smiling without humor now. He told me once that I had potential if I could clean up the unkempt parts. He meant my life. He looked at a photocopy of a doctor's bill and asked me if debt made me creative. The darkness between them crackled. It rearranged. Rowan's knuckles whitened on the wheel. He thought of Felix's hand on his shoulder at the last conference and felt the way you feel when you turn over a stone and find a nest of worms. He would not be handing him a signature anymore. Not ever. Westline, the Westline plant perched on the edge of a flat river like a man learning to walk. White tanks rose into dawn, stairs curling around them like ribbons. The morning smelled of cut grass and something metallic that belonged to factories and old childhoods. Naomi watched the light take the tanks and turn them silver. Inside, in the control room, the screens glowed an aquatic blue, feathery, like innards. There were names for everything here: Tower A Exchanger, Bed 1, Scrubber, and each name had a heart rate. Gus, the plant manager, was the kind of man you trusted to do complicated things with wrenches. He nodded to Naomi as if she were an engineer he'd known for years. That calmed her more than anything. She sat, hands flat on her knees, before the main screen. You have the simulations. Everything, Gus said. We ran them last night with 9 and 7 both. 7 is fine. 9 is hot, Rowan said. Not immediately, Gus said. It's treacherous. It looks okay for a while, and then it doesn't. And because we've had partial polymerization in this line before, there's a risk of microfouling at that chain length. It becomes a clog. Clog becomes heat pocket. Heat pocket becomes cascade, Naomi said softly. Meltdown, Gus said. His eyes flicked to her. Miss, you knew to look. Naomi didn't answer. She didn't need to. They changed the input in the simulation to match the actual line. Naomi suggested a tiny tweak to the humidity curve. Your facility is dry, but this section, she said, pointing, has a microclimate, and sat back as the line wove itself across the screen. At 37 minutes, the temperature began to climb. At 51, the line shot upward like a scream. Rowan let air out of his lungs in increments. Okay. Okay, Mira's voice snapped. She had arrived on the red eye, unslept and acidic. Okay, we threw away $100 million on the word of a waitress, and your response is okay. Gus took one look at Mira and turned as if he were busy pretending he had this kind of conflict 10 times a day. Rowan pivoted to Mira slowly. The old instinct to placate, to charm, to conjure money by making it feel adored rose in his throat like a bad habit. He spit it back out. You made a mistake, a bad one. You handed our worst suitor a rope and asked him to build a swing. He built a noose. Mira's chest rose and fell. She put both hands on the back of a swiveled chair and gripped it like religion. I was trying to keep us alive. I know, he said gently. I know the smell of scarcity. It's followed me through every room, but this particular survival technique was self-immolation. She blinked. Her rage cracked at the edges. A different expression showed through, exhaustion, and the thin skin of a woman who had been hit by men with smiles like marble lions, and who had learned to be the sharpest knife in returned exchange because otherwise they took her hands. I'll resign, she said, voice emptying. No, he said. You'll stay, we need you. We need a CFO who learned the hard way what not to do, but you'll apologize to Miss Vale and you'll help me get her on payroll, today, if she wants it. They both looked at Naomi. She looked as if someone had put a glass dome over her and then lifted it again too fast, leaving her breathless. I don't need, she began. Name your terms, Rowan said. Naomi shut her mouth. She wasn't naive. She knew the math of power and gratitude. Hourly, she said, for now, and health insurance, and a letter of reference if this goes bad. It will go bad, Mira said bitterly. Everything goes bad. But then she stuck out her hand. Thank you, she muttered, for opening your mouth at the wrong moment. Naomi took the hand, shook. Felix, of course, didn't fade. He called. He texted. He sent a legal letter with 10 pages of words that meant you'll regret saying no to me more than you will regret the wrong yes. When that didn't work, he leaked. A story appeared by noon in the most-read tech newsletter. Billionaire Ivers loses nerve, walks away from $100M lifeline after Waitress sows doubt. The comments were a petri dish. Some called it ethics, some called it madness, some called it optics. The photograph they used of Naomi, snatched from her social account 3 years ago, made her look younger and softer than the woman who sat in front of the simulation and said what no one wanted to hear. Ezra read them anyway. He slammed the trumpet case shut. "People are stupid," he said fiercely. "They're human," Naomi murmured. It was not the same thing. Fire, it should have ended there with a headline and a hard choice. But when you step on a chain, it runs you back to where it was anchored. 2 days later, a junior engineer named Maryam came to Gus with a concern about a valve at bed 1. It was sticky. Maintenance wanted to wait for the weekend to open the line when downtime wouldn't cost. Gus told Maryam he wanted it checked that day. He had 3 decades of plant instincts, the kind you can't teach anyone without skinning your knees for 20 years. Maryam swung it open. The smell punched her in the nose, not burned sugar, not glue, something acid-sweet. A smear of polymer clung to the interior wall, thin as jelly, hardening. She felt the heat on her cheek like a staring face. She called Gus. He ran. He called Naomi. She stood before bed 30 seconds later. "Shut it down," she said. "Now." Gus made the call. The line began to wind down, the numbers on the control room board stepping like dancers into the wings. But the curve on the small screen on the floor, the one only Maryam seemed to care about, kept drifting up. "It's not dropping fast enough," Maryam said. Her voice had too much mourning in it for that fear. "Scrubber vent," Gus said. "Override." Orlov appeared out of air. He had not slept either, but he had a way of being awake that suggested an animal in the snow. "Do not override without my sign-off." "We have polymer in the bed," Gus said. "Impossible," Orlov said. "This line isn't running and equals 9. "Last week it did," Maryam said. Something altered in Orlov's face. It was subtle as the motion of a snake. "Who told you to adjust the spec last week?" Rowan asked quietly. Orlov's gaze flicked to the catwalk. Naomi followed it. Up there, leaning on the railing as if he owned not only the plant but the air he breathed, was Felix Dern. He wore a hard hat like a crown. He smiled down at Rowan, and the contempt in the smile was not even hidden. "What is he doing here?" Rowan said. His voice sounded almost bored. It was how he always sounded when rage made him clean. "Reconciling a discrepancy," Mira said. She was white to the lips. "He wanted to tour. He didn't sign an NDA. I told him to." "You told him what?" "I told him to get lost," she said. "He didn't. He brought an inspector with a badge that isn't a badge. He threatened to call the governor. Jobs, jobs, jobs," she swallowed. "I told security to escort him out. He told them he owns the bank that holds our construction loans." "He does not," Rowan said. "He owns a piece of a company that holds those loans, and he thinks he owns fear." Orlov took a step toward the control panel. Naomi moved to block him before she understood why. His shoulder brushed hers. She shivered as if she'd placed her palm on ice. "Do not touch that," she said. "My job," he murmured, "is to keep this thing from becoming a headline." "Too late," she said. "It's going to be a tombstone." He looked at her as if she were a smaller, slower creature. Then he reached. Rowan's hand caught his wrist. They stood like that for 5 seconds, 3 people attached to a machine that did not care about them at all. "Gus," Rowan said, "manual quench." "We don't have manual," Gus said. "We never installed the port. You told me we'd never need it." "I did." "You did." His eyes were kind. He regretted to tell him. "Get me a portable," Naomi said. "And someone with long arms." Gus blinked. "We have the unit from the test bay," he said. "It's not rated for right now," Naomi said. They ran. They brought the portable quench, which looked like something teenagers would build in a garage if they were trying to impress a girl who loved physics. Maryam unscrewed a valve that had not been unscrewed in months. It gave like a tooth. Heat breathed. The room smelled of a dream of glue. Naomi lay on her stomach on the metal grate and slid her arm into the space beneath the line, reaching for a port that had never been meant to be reached like this. Her skin prickled. Her shirt stuck to her back. She thought of Ezra asleep in the car with his trumpet case. "Naomi," Rowan said. It was her name, but it was a plea. She ignored him. "Gus, on 3, turn." "Turning," Gus said through his teeth. She opened the quench. She could feel the temperature shift with her skin. She could feel the chemistry change, less like a scream and more like a gasp. She heard Maryam breathe. She thought of Lily holding a pharmacy bottle like it might dissolve. She thought of Felix's laugh in a lab full of undergraduates. The curve on the little screen slid, slowly, slowly, like a stubborn child's hand released from a closing door. Orlov stepped back. And then, in a motion so fast Naomi almost thought she'd imagined it, he grabbed the cord on the portable and yanked. "Stop," she yelped. The quench unit jolted, the line juddered. The plug slipped in its seat, the seal gasped. She heard a note, a pure high tone, as pressure found a way into the space meant for calm. Orlov's mouth had a shape like regret, but his eyes were empty. "It's better for you if it fails now," he said softly, as if sharing gossip. "If it fails without a deal, you are a man who overreached. If it fails after, you are a criminal." He would never make a speech where anyone could parse it. He was not that dumb. But the words were a thin mask for the truth. Felix had found his lever. It was Orlov, which meant last week's spec. Which meant the deck, which meant the trap had been larger than the table at Larkspur. Rowan didn't say a word. He drove his fist into Orlov's jaw. There was a howl from somewhere, and Naomi realized it was her. Orlov stumbled, the cord slackening. Gus kicked him in the shins with a cheerfulness born of men who were tired of pretending to be gentlemen, and Orlov went down. "Plug," Rowan said. His voice was hoarse. "Naomi." "I've got it," she grunted. She pushed her arm deeper. She felt heat singe the hair on her wrist. She found the seat. She sealed it. The curve bent and fell. The silence that followed that fall was not a chapel. It was a hangar. It was too big for breathing. Naomi rolled onto her back and began to laugh and then cry. The sounds braided so tightly she could not pick them apart. Orlov lay still, blood in his teeth. Felix had vanished. He was good at that. Men like him had learned how to leave footprints that didn't bother the dirt. Gus's hand, greasy and sure, hauled Naomi to her feet. "You all right, miss?" "I'm fine," she said, shaken. She looked at Rowan. He had his fist cradled against his ribs. He had hit a man for the first time since he was 17, and someone had called his sister a word he did not repeat. He looked sick. He looked relieved. He looked alive. Mira arrived then, breathless with economic ruin. She took in the scene and went rigid. "What did you do?" "I did what you pay me for," Gus said cheerfully. "I kept your lab from becoming a funeral." Orlov groaned. "He's up," Maryam said. "Good," Mira said grimly and motioned to security. "Put him in the admin office. See if he has Felix's lawyer in his favorites. Call the police and call a reporter. I want them here." "You're going to tell?" Rowan asked low. She turned her head and looked at him with an expression he'd never seen on her, a joy that had nothing to do with money. "I'm going to tell the truth," she said. "I'm tired of lying. It made me sloppy." Romans 7, reckoning it did not become the tidy narrative in anyone's head. It became messy. It became human. Felix denied everything. He smiled into cameras and said that he was a steward of capital and a believer in safety. A clip surfaced, Felix at state, younger, cockier, leaning over a lab bench with a girl in a ponytail. He was pointing at a whiteboard. He was saying something that made the girl lift her chin like an animal about to bite. Of course, the internet found Naomi. They found Ezra. They found their mother's GoFundMe from years back, where Naomi had written in the middle of the night and uploaded a picture of a woman far too beautiful to be that sick. Half the comments were love. Half the comments were knives. Rowan lost his board chair. He offered to resign. The board said no, wait. Then 2 investors called. Then the governor did. The governor said things about job protection that made Rowan want to fill his mouth with a river. Mira held press conferences with a calm that made men love her, and women send her private messages saying they'd watched without breathing. She said words like breach and decoy and responsibility. The stock dipped. It rose. It dipped again. Orlov pled guilty to nothing and everything. He was found to have a bank account in the Cayman Islands filled with repayments for consulting. He insisted to the end that he had tried to save everyone from a worse downfall. He was right in his way. He was wrong in the way that matters. Naomi went back to Larkspur. The owner held her job. She could have quit. She didn't. She liked the way serving makes you learn people's eyes. It made her better at the control room. She straddled both worlds, liminal. In the afternoons, she ran simulations with Maryam and Gus. At night, she took orders for mushroom ravioli and folded napkins and laughed when Ezra snuck in with his trumpet to play Happy Birthday out of tune for a table with the kind of joy that made everyone laugh. She took Rowan's call on a Wednesday when he had a panic attack in his office and sat on the phone with him in silence for 8 minutes until he could breathe again. "Why did you help me?" he asked once, when the worst of it had ebbed and their lives had become a new kind of normal. She looked at him, tilted her head like a sparrow. Because I saw the train. That's it. What else is there? She asked. You were tied to the tracks, but you were also the guy driving. I can be angry at that because I don't like billionaires, or I can help you cut the rope because I like daycare centers. I chose the one that felt like I could live with myself. And because you listened, that matters. He nodded. He filed that away where he filed the inventory of what mattered. It wasn't a product. It wasn't a pipeline. It was a waitress who sat in quiet rooms and told rich men that their numbers were off. Roman 8. Winter they fixed the spec, of course. They went back to n=7. They found a quench port for the line that wasn't there. Naomi designed it with Mariam on a paper napkin, and Gus installed it himself. They wrote it into the manual and underlined it twice. Rowan took the manual and slid it under his pillow like a fairy tale and slept for the first time in months without waking at 2. He dreamed of his father, not the man with the oxygen tank, but the one with mines in his hands and a laugh like a bark. Felix moved on to different prey. He liked founders who wanted to be loved as much as they wanted to be funded. He found them. He always would. Mira did something no one expected. She called her mother and apologized for lying about her job when she was 23. She went to the DMV and changed her emergency contact. She soldered something in herself that had cracked so long ago she'd thought it was part of her. Then she came to the plant on a Sunday and made pancakes for everyone, and Mariam cried because they were the first pancakes anyone had cooked for her at work that didn't taste of flour and salt. They tasted like kindness. Naomi got insurance. She took her mother to a doctor who looked in her eyes and told her they would try new things. Ezra learned to play the trumpet well enough that the waitress at Larkspur went outside at closing to hear him practice in the alley because he made the metal sound like summer. And Rowan did not get his $100 million. He stepped down as CEO because the board asked him to kindly, with words like focus and public, and you'll be more useful in the work. He agreed. He cried in a bathroom stall and then felt a relief so profound it almost made him dizzy. He stayed on as chief scientist, though he was no such thing. He was a man who had learned to ask the right people the right questions. He went on long walks around the tanks with Naomi and talked about things like fear and debt and the way numbers look when you haven't slept. On a night in December, snow fell onto the plant roof and melted and fell and melted. They stood in coats and watched their breath make ghosts. Rowan held something in his hand. He looked at Naomi. He looked as if one more whisper would set him on fire. I have a confession, he said. My father used to say there are 2 kinds of men in a plant, the ones who listen to the pipe sing and the ones who tell the pipe it's off key until it breaks. I've been the second for too long. She smiled. You hit a man to keep a line from breaking. That's not nothing, he laughed, embarrassed. I don't want to be that man. You won't, she said with a certainty that was not a gift but a mirror. You already aren't. He took her hand and set the thing he'd been holding into her palm. It was a key. A small, brass thing. It meant nothing except that one room would open when she turned it. The lab, the small one off the control room, he said. It's yours, if you want it, to build a thing, or to build nothing and drink coffee in. I don't care, if you decide to come back, to science, on your terms. She looked at the key, her mouth softened. She thought of waking up at 3 with equations running like fish. She thought of debt. She thought of Ezra's trumpet and her mother's new pills and the way she had felt when the line curve bent downward, when a plant didn't explode because she put her arm where heat wanted it. She closed her fingers. I'll take it, she said. Then, because she liked the way words felt when you honored them with the right tone, I'll take it for now. I want to build a layered thing, solid sorbent. It might not work, it probably won't. We like long odds, he said softly. She slipped the key into her coat. Snow gathered on the brim of her hat. She looked up into the falling. For the first time since she had left the lab with her heart blistered from a man like a wolf laughing at her, she let herself want. Roman 9. Epilogue, the formula years later. Long after Westline had become the plant everyone used as a reference when they argued about whether climate tech could be both smart and kind. A story made the rounds again about the waitress who whispered to the billionaire. It was told in classrooms where girls with messy buns watched the world like they were going to fix it. It was told in conference rooms where men with expensive watches learned to take off their watches and put them face down. It was told in the voices of plant managers with grease under their nails because they had watched a woman lie on her stomach under a line and reach for heat. The story always began with the line, "That's the wrong formula." What the story didn't know, because stories are better when they leave you places to fill, was that the wrong formula wasn't just a line of numbers in a binder. It was a way of living. It was the default that said speed matters more than people, that money knows the right ratios, that silence is safer. Naomi changed one digit, yes, she also altered something else. She made a man like Rowan Ivers decide he would rather be slow and right than fast and permanent. She made Mira choose to tell the truth on a Monday. She made Ezra practice until the trumpet was not a weapon he used against boredom, but an instrument he used to tell his sister he loved her. Rowan always said the most important thing that happened that night at Larkspur wasn't losing a deal. It was hearing his own life say, wrong, then hearing himself say, stop. Naomi always said the most important thing she learned wasn't that she was right about n=7. It was that sometimes you do a small, terrifying thing in a room where you are meant to be invisible, and the world rearranges itself to let you be seen. And Felix. He was indicted, he was acquitted. He took a job at a fund that paid him more than the last and less than his fantasy. He died of nothing interesting. The day they put him in the ground, the sky was the color of a whiteboard and the wind made a sound like laboratories. No one wrote the word genius in the program. Orlov got a plea deal. He moved to a town where no one cared what he'd done. He coached a soccer team of 10-year-olds and told them sometimes that being brave meant passing the ball when you'd rather shoot. Even he knew that. Mira ran for office. She lost once, then won. She pushed a bill through a labyrinth that made it easier for plants to retrofit quench ports. She went to a daycare center opening and held a scissored ribbon with both hands because she wanted the ribbon to know it had been severed on purpose. Gus retired. He left a wrench in his locker, wrapped in a t-shirt, as if someone might need it. Maryam got a doctorate and came back to the plant anyway, because she liked to watch numbers fall into the place where air becomes less ugly. Ezra played a lot of happy birthdays. He played an elegy at a memorial service for miners whose names you didn't read in the paper because the paper wasn't interested anymore. He played a wedding song for the woman he loved. He played a song that made Naomi cry once in a way that was about joy and not about relief. Naomi did not become rich or famous. She built things quietly and talked in rooms without chandeliers. She had days when the ratios looked like birds and days when they looked like static. She had mornings when she woke and put her feet on the floor and thought, I am so tired of being brave. On those days, she went to the plant anyway. Once, in a charity gala they didn't want to be at but went to because someone asked, Rowan found himself standing before a man who asked him for advice. What is the right formula? The man asked, a drink varnishing his smile. To make something matter. Rowan looked across the room. Naomi was in a black dress and beat-up boots. She had taken off her name badge and put it inside her pocket because she didn't want to be called principal investigator tonight. She was laughing at something Gus had said. He watched the way her head tipped back. The wrong formula is the one without a quench, Rowan said, without someone who will whisper when everyone else is clapping. The right one is the one with a person who sees, and a person who listens. The man didn't like the answer. He went away. Rowan didn't mind. He had spent too many years trying to fill men like that with the nutrient they lacked. He was tired. He was happy. On the anniversary of the near meltdown, Naomi walked to bed one. She put her palm on the metal. It was cold enough to make her skin ache. She closed her eyes and listened. Somewhere under the skin of steel and heat and process and money, the numbers sang. They were in tune. She heard a trumpet in her mind. She heard a father who never prayed again after the mine ate his friend, but who loved a son enough to tell him the truth. That's the wrong formula, she whispered to the room for luck, and then, smiling, she added the sentence that had changed her life. So we'll do it different.